Before the war came, Leningrad was a city of brilliance, a living monument to Russian culture and Soviet pride. Home to nearly 3 million souls, its grand palaces, shimmering canals, and roaring factories symbolized the strength of the new socialist world. But far to the west, another vision was taking shape, a darker one. In 1941, Adolf Hitler set his eyes on the cradle of Bolshevism. To him, Leningrad was not just a city, it was an idea that had to be erased from history. Directive 21, the blueprint for Operation Barbarossa, named it one of the German war machine's primary targets, alongside Moscow and Kiev. As the Axis legions massed on the border, few in Leningrad could imagine the storm that was about to descend upon them. What awaited was not just another battle. It was a siege unlike any the world had ever seen, a struggle of endurance, hunger, and unimaginable suffering. The cradle of revolution was about to become the city of ghosts. And yet, it would not fall. The summer of 1941 burned bright with fire and steel. Within weeks of launching Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's armies carved through the Soviet frontier like a blade through glass. Whole divisions vanished. Cities fell silent. And to the north, Field Marshal von Leib's Army Group North thundered toward Leningrad. As the front collapsed, millions fled eastward. But in Leningrad, there was nowhere left to run. The city braced itself for the inevitable. Civilians became soldiers overnight. Women, students, and factory workers dug endless lines of trenches encircling their home. Concrete bunkers rose beside wooden barricades, a desperate wall against the coming storm. By September, the horizon glowed red with the fires of war. The German spearheads had reached the outskirts, and their artillery began to pound the suburbs into dust. Supply lines were cut. The city was alone. And yet, amidst the chaos, a quiet resolve spread through the people. They knew what Hitler had decreed, that no surrender would be accepted, no mercy shown. If Leningrad was to die, it would die fighting. The siege had begun, and for the next 872 days, hell itself would freeze over the city. September 8, 1941, the day Leningrad was cut off from the world. Railways severed, supply routes burned. German bombers roared overhead, dropping fire upon the city's warehouses until the sky itself seemed to ignite. In a single night, most of Leningrad's food reserves were reduced to ash. Inside the city walls, despair began to whisper. The Red Army was shattered, its ranks thinned by endless retreats. Ammunition ran short, rations grew thinner by the hour. And yet, there was no thought of surrender, for everyone knew what surrender meant. Hitler had made it clear: no mercy, no survivors. Leningrad was to be erased, its people starved, its streets flattened, its name forgotten. But rather than flee, the people dug in. Families turned their basements into bunkers. Children carried sandbags to the front lines. The city itself became a fortress of defiance. When the first German troops probed the outskirts, expecting an easy victory, they were met not with fear, but with fire. Civilians and soldiers fought side by side, driving the invaders back in a storm of bullets and burning debris. The siege had begun in blood and fire, and the people of Leningrad would not bow. Winter came early to Leningrad, and it came like a killer. By November, the snow was knee-deep, the rivers frozen solid, and the city's furnaces long gone cold. The people burned furniture, books, even wallpaper for warmth. Bread rations fell to mere crumbs, 125 grams a day, barely enough to survive. Then the dying began. Bodies lined the streets, frozen where they fell. Mothers carried lifeless children through the blizzard, searching for a place to bury them in the iron ground. The smell of death clung to the air, thick and unrelenting. Yet even in this frozen hell, hope refused to die. As Lake Ladoga froze, Soviet engineers built what would be called the Road of Life, a perilous path of ice across the lake. Through bombs, frost, and darkness, trucks crept over the frozen water, bringing food in and carrying the living out. But for every convoy that made it through, others vanished beneath shattered ice. Still, the city endured, starved, frozen, but unbroken. Leningrad held on. And as the snow fell silently over the corpses of the dead, the survivors whispered one vow. They will not take our city. As Leningrad starved behind its frozen walls, the Soviet High Command refused to let the city die in silence. In early 1942, desperate to break the siege, the Red Army struck back. From the snow-covered forests and frozen swamps came wave after wave of Soviet soldiers, ill-equipped, hungry, but burning with vengeance. One of the largest of these efforts, the Lyuban Offensive, threw more than 300,000 men against the German lines south of the city. They fought through blizzards, through minefields, through endless artillery fire. But the German positions were dug deep, fortified with steel and ice. Weeks turned to months, and soon the offensive bled itself dry. When the counterattack finally came, the entire Second Shock Army was surrounded and annihilated. Tens of thousands perished, their bodies buried beneath the snow, their names lost to the frost. The fields outside Leningrad became a graveyard of frozen steel and shattered dreams. Still, Moscow refused to abandon the city. Each failed assault was followed by another, each defeat by another desperate plan. For Stalin, Leningrad was more than a city. It was the soul of the revolution, and the Soviet soul could not be allowed to die. By the summer of 1942, the guns around Leningrad had fallen into a deadly rhythm, the thunder of artillery at dawn, the wail of bombers at dusk. The city still stood, but only barely. Each day was a battle for survival. Then, a new commander arrived. Lieutenant General Leonid Govorov, a man forged in fire, calm under pressure, and feared by the Germans for his precision and resolve. Where others saw ruin, Govorov saw opportunity. He studied the enemy lines, the frozen rivers, the swamps, and began to plan. While the Germans prepared their great assault, Operation Nordlicht, Northern Light, Govorov quietly turned the tables. In the autumn of 1942, his forces struck first, hammering German positions east of the city. For 3 brutal weeks, both sides bled heavily, but the Soviet counterblow forced Hitler to cancel his grand offensive. Leningrad had survived again, not by miracle, but by calculation. For the first time since the siege began, the defenders could feel the balance shifting. The Germans had come to crush a symbol, but that symbol had learned to fight back. January 1943. The snow was deep, the air sharp as glass. And after 18 months of hunger and death, Leningrad still refused to fall. Now, at last, the Red Army prepared to strike a blow that could change everything. The plan was codenamed Operation Iskra, the Spark. Its goal? To pierce the German lines south of Lake Ladoga and open a narrow lifeline to the city. The gap between the trapped defenders and the outside world was only 10 miles, but it might as well have been 1,000. On January 12th, under the roar of 800 Soviet aircraft, the assault began. Artillery thundered across the frozen plains, shaking the very earth. Men charged through ice and swamp, through barbed wire and machine gun nests, each step bought with blood. For 6 endless days, they fought hand to hand in the snow. Then, in the early hours of January 18th, 2 Soviet fronts met. Their lines joined at last. After more than a year of isolation, Leningrad was no longer alone. It wasn't liberation, not yet, but it was hope. A spark had been lit. And soon, that spark would become a fire. The spark of hope had been lit, but the fire was far from victory. Even after Operation Iskra opened a narrow land corridor, Leningrad remained under siege. The German guns still thundered day and night, their shells raining down on homes, hospitals, and schools. By mid-1943, only 750,000 people were left alive in the city. Most were too weak to stand, their faces pale and hollow from starvation. And yet, the factories still worked. In freezing workshops with shattered roofs, men and women reloaded spent shells, repaired tanks, and forged new weapons for the front. Trams ran again through streets scarred by craters. Children attended school in bomb shelters, writing lessons by candlelight as artillery shook the walls. Hospitals overflowed, but disease was kept at bay through sheer will and discipline. Outside the city, Soviet armies tried again to crush the siege, launching Operation Polar Star, a massive offensive meant to destroy Army Group North once and for all. But the Germans withdrew just in time, tightening their lines and denying the Soviets victory. Still, Leningrad endured. The people had survived hunger, cold, and death itself. Now all that remained was to fight back. By the winter of 1944, the balance had finally shifted. The Red Army, battle-hardened and relentless, now stood ready to deliver the final blow. For nearly 900 days, Leningrad had endured famine, fire, and death. Now it was time for retribution. General Leonid Govorov drew his plan with precision. His goal: to crush the German 18th Army and drive Army Group North out of the Leningrad region forever. On the night of January 13th, the sky erupted. Soviet bombers darkened the heavens, raining fire on German airfields and trenches. An hour later, the ground itself seemed to explode as thousands of artillery guns unleashed their fury. Then came the infantry, a human tide of determination. Through snow and smoke, they stormed the German lines, pushing forward mile by mile, village by village. The Germans counterattacked fiercely, but it was too late. Their ranks were shattered, their supply lines broken. By January 26th, the front had collapsed. The enemy was in full retreat, driven back over 100 miles. And that day Stalin declared it to the world. Leningrad was free. After 872 days of hell, the siege was finally over. The city had survived the unthinkable and won. When the guns finally fell silent, Leningrad was a shadow of what it once had been. The streets were lined with ruins, the grand palaces of the czars reduced to ashes, and the air still heavy with the smell of smoke and loss. Of the 3 million souls who once called this city home, fewer than 800,000 remained. More than 640,000 civilians had perished, most from hunger and cold. Families vanished. Children became orphans. Yet the survivors stood tall, defiant, and proud. They had endured what no city ever should, and refused to kneel. For the Red Army, victory had come at a terrible price. Over 3 million Soviet soldiers lost in the battles for Leningrad, against 500,000 German dead. But the city had held, and in doing so, it had broken Hitler's dream of conquest in the East. Leningrad became a symbol, not of suffering alone, but of unyielding spirit, a testament to courage, endurance, and the human will to survive the impossible. Even today, the people of St. Petersburg remember those 872 days of darkness and the light that refused to die. When the guns finally fell silent, Leningrad stood, battered, starved, yet unbroken. Its people had endured hunger, fire, and death itself, but never surrendered. From the ashes rose a city reborn, its streets echoing not with despair but with defiance. The siege of Leningrad was more than a battle. It was a testament to the unyielding strength of the human spirit, proof that courage can outlast cruelty, and that even in the darkest winter, hope burns brighter than any flame. Leningrad did not merely survive, it became immortal.